West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte
After months and months of negotiations, a bipartisan group of senators has reached a deal on a bill addressing border security and foreign aid. It's a $118 billion package. It calls for over $20 billion in border security measures that include hiring new asylum officers and border security agents, expanding the number of detention beds, and increasing screenings for fentanyl and other drugs.
Wow, that's all tough.
The bill would end the practice of catch and release and raise the standard of asylum, which would send those away who do not qualify more quickly, while expediting the process for cases that do.
Republicans must love this.
The legislation grants a new emergency authority to the White House and the Homeland Security Department to close the border once encounters reach a certain threshold.
The border
Shut it down.
Wow.
In terms of foreign aid, over $60 billion would be allotted for Ukraine. $14 billion would be given to Israel, and $10 billion would be given for humanitarian assistance for civilians in Gaza and the West Bank.
Well, that's just good for everybody.
Makes everyone happy. Despite the bill being crafted by a bipartisan group of senators, it is already facing major pushback from both sides of the aisle. Two Senate Democrats, California Senator Alex Padilla and New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, say they are against the bill. The House Republican leadership say they won't bring the bill up for a vote, with Speaker Mike Johnson saying it's even worse than expected. No, it's
that's
not.
Just a lie. And I'd love to know what Bible he's looking at when he says he lives by the Bible, because it's bizarre that this guy is worshiping at the feet of Donald Trump. Basically does whatever Donald Trump tells him to do, and was, of course, the chief sponsor of the big lie in the House of Representatives. So just ask Liz Cheney.
So as Speaker Johnson calls this even worse than expected, the lead Republican senator who negotiated the bill, James Lankford of Oklahoma, responded to those comments.
I'm a little confused how it's worse than expected when it builds border wall, expands deportation flights, expands ICE officers, Border Patrol officers, detention beds, how it creates a faster process for deportation, how it clears up a lot of the long-term issues and loopholes that have existed in the asylum law, and then gives us an emergency authority that stops the chaos right now on the border. So I'm a little confused. I'll have to be able to get with the speaker's team on that to be able to find out what part would be quote-unquote worse than what we had expected based on the actual text, and hopefully they've all had an opportunity to be able to actually read through the text.
Well, you know, Senator Lankford, Jonathan Lemire, obviously has good reason to be confused, because this is the toughest border bill in a generation. If you had read any of that to us a year or two ago, we would all say, oh, yeah, that's the Republican wish list. You go down it, it's a Republican wish list. And now, just because Mike is being told by Donald not to pass this bill, to continue to allow fentanyl to flood into the country, continue to allow illegal immigrants to flood into this country, what do we have? We have a situation where they want to keep the border open because it's bad for America, and they believe what's bad for America is good for Donald Trump.
So text of the bill only came out late yesterday. It sort of defies logic that everyone's read it so far, but that hasn't stopped a number of Republicans from coming out vehemently against it. We've known for a while now it had a real uphill climb in the House, and Speaker Johnson is as you just said, dramatically opposing it. He also compared himself to Moses in an interview over the weekend. So as you speak about his own religion, beliefs, there's that one.
Did Moses spread a big lie too? Was Moses the chief architect of a big lie? And
I didn't know
I'm pretty sure it's the exact
either.
opposite. In fact, he brought down the truth from the top, from the mount.
That's
how I remember
yeah.
it. But it's also now this bill, as we'll hear more from our colleagues in a few minutes, also faces a real uphill climb in the Senate now. A number of Republicans are opposed to it. Mitch McConnell sort of had a magic number of GOP colleagues he wants to get there. That's seemingly unlikely. There's growing discussion that this is going to end up being some separate bills after all. Speaker Johnson's already put one forth for just on Israel. Unclear what happens to Ukraine. And now it seems like the border is going to go unaddressed. And this is something that poll after poll shows Americans want its leaders to deal with. Republicans for months have said we will, until Donald Trump said, I'd like to preserve that as a campaign issue. What I'm told here is this is the make or break week for this bill. At the moment, there's an expectation that it will fail. And I think if it does, if it is defeated, we will then see, Elise, I think a real push for President Biden to head to the border and say, and it's not going to happen until it's done. He's not going to go there this week. But when it's done, and if it does fail, he's going to go there and say, I was willing to sign this, the toughest border security bill in history. Aides tell me that would be the message. It's Republicans who are in the way.
And I see no way, really. I would be shocked if this bill passes and if anything comes to fruition. You look at what Steve Scalise tweeted out immediately. This bill is going to allow 5,000 more illegal immigrants in a year. And then also he was, the automatic work permits. Republicans are going to, raise hell about that too. So anything that they can do to say oh, this bill is just going to let in more illegal immigrants and it really wasn't stopping anything, that will be their simplistic message, way oversimplifying what really is a sweeping bill and should happen, for the sake of national security. Less about immigration than the national security threats that are coming through that border. But I think that Republicans are really going to seize on. They can say, no, it's allowing more people in, and then nothing will happen.
Wow. All right, let's bring in NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin. Julie, you've been covering every detail of this. What comes next?
Here's the reality. Republicans are perhaps deliberately mischaracterizing what this bill does and doesn't do. When you talk about that 5,000 a day number, this is something we fact-checked even before the bill text came out, because again, it is impossible for this bill to prevent migrants from coming to the border illegally. All they can do in the beginning is try to put in mechanisms to discourage that from happening. So that's point number one, that is just completely mischaracterized. Point number two, you talk about work requirements, for example. This bill would deny work permits for anybody that comes to the border between ports of entry, only allowing that provision, allowing that right to people who come legally to ports of entry and initially pass their asylum screening. So those two things are being heavily misconstrued by Republicans. Those are some of the things we heard Langford say he's going to try to clear up. But let's also talk about what this bill doesn't do, and that is it does not provide any pathway to citizenship for undocumented dreamers. A few months ago, if you had told Democrats that they were going to accept a bill that had all these conservative priorities in it, without that pathway, that would be a complete pipe dream. And here you have Democrats and Republicans who are agreeing on this pathway forward. And then you have extremists, in the words of Senator Sinema, Langford, Murphy, and Schumer last night, who were on calls with reporters for hours trying to put an end to some of the lies, frankly, that are being told about this bill, who are on the same page and willing to let it go through in order to fix the border, in order to allow that aid to Ukraine and Israel to go through. So bottom line here, look, Jonathan is exactly right when he's talking about the uphill battle this faces in the Senate before it even gets to the House. It'll be interesting to see once the Senate returns tonight early to process the bill, whether Lankford can have any luck in terms of moving his Republican colleagues closer in his direction here. But if it doesn't happen this week, I mean, there's going to be real talk of completely splitting off the border aid. McConnell already alluded to this the other week. He said if this doesn't go through, Ukraine aid and Israel aid has to move regardless. So it'll be interesting if there will be a broad bipartisan coalition trying to make that happen instead.
It is Monday, the 5th of February of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special, daily special River City Hash Mondays. Yes, as you well know, whatever is left over from the weekend, we repurpose, reconstitute, we revitalize into a lovely gourmet dish for your gourmet dish delight. Oh boy. So we had quite a weekend here in our little hamlet of Rogue River. We actually had not a terribly bad weekend up until yesterday when the power went out. And that was when as you may remember, do any of us remember Friday? That was so long ago. The weather report did have us under a high wind alert. And indeed, it finally came through here on Sunday and blew a bunch of trees down, apparently. And over half of the town was thrust into darkness in the middle of the day, around noontime. And lasted all the rest of the day, and we were given a 5:30 estimated time of when we would have our power restored. And then about 5 o'clock, we started getting notices. It was going to be 11:30, almost midnight. And some of us were wondering, well, that doesn't sound good. But fortunately, it came on just about 5:15, around the 5:30. It was actually a little after the 5:30 mark, but before 6. So that was almost like a gift. It's like, oh, wow. Well, it was like better than what they said. So maybe they just put out a notice. Tell a bunch of people it'll be 11:30. Then when we turn it on, they'll think we're doing our job better than they thought we could. And it's true. That's how it works. But yeah, it happens. The weather is quite terrible. I should make note that we will be having a Friday show, as far as I know. But that is the day that I fly out with my sister and brother-in-law, and I think my brother or my younger brother is going to be on the same flight. There's only one that goes down there to Southern California from Medford, Oregon. Should I be telling people where I'm flying out of? Maybe not. But nonetheless, be flying out in the afternoon, so we got to leave here about noonish. And so that should not really impede upon the show, but it may be that I've decided I need to get things ready and make sure that my mom's meds are portioned out for the time that I'm gone, because the grandmother of our grandchildren, and my oldest granddaughter, who is out of high school, will be coming to care for Mom. Make sure, if you didn't know that Mom, was old and has, a bit of dementia, You think that she was like, really nice old lady, gets around. Well, you get around. But she can't be left alone. So, and everybody recognizes that. And the reason I'm flying out of town, of course, is for my dad's birthday. And he's going to be 96. So there. And you're not going to get very many 96 birthdays. You don't. So we consider this one to be fairly important, and we're going to go. Especially since he asked for all of us, and he never does that. So that's what I'll be doing. And then Monday's show, a week from today, we will have to forego. I was thinking about what I might do, because the radio station is going to have to go on some sort of autopilot. I can queue things up. It takes a bit of work ahead of time, and I may do that. But at the very least, if we have to fall back onto our friends' Progressive Voices Radio, we'll just turn them on when shows like David's come up. Well, then they can just come up automatically, because that's part of everything that we do here. And that's rather cryptic, but so be it. But nonetheless, Monday I'll be coming back too late to do a show. But we will be back for Tuesday, because the show must go on. It must. Alrighty. So, what's been happening in the world? Of course, Donald Trump whining. Boy, things that happened on Friday and Saturday seem like so long ago. So long. And then yesterday being, in the dark. Not having access to internet or whatnot. Well, actually, I did somewhat. I was able to get cellular feeds on my smartphone. So I was able to get on my smartphone. But then it started losing charge. So you got to go somewhere to get it charged up. It can get charged up in the car, but only when the car is running. So there's that. And anyway, so, kind of in the dark for yesterday. But this, I started getting in my social media feed, Donald Trump claiming that people have been telling him for years that he looks like Elvis Presley. Wow, man, you look like Elvis Presley. And I was thinking, yeah, after a bunch of those peanut butter banana and pork sandwiches, pulled pork sandwiches. I don't know, maybe not pulled pork, fried pork, deep fried pork patties with bananas and peanut butter and whatever other godly things that he would eat. And he just kind of puffed up, and he was a young guy too, in his 40s. And people were saying, yeah, you look like Elvis Presley. And I'm like, well, I guess I can see somewhat of a resemblance in the puffy cheeks. Oh, my God. But no, of course, everybody knows it. He thinks that he looks like Elvis Presley when he was Elvis the Pelvis. So, yeah. Oh, you think I look like Elvis the Pelvis? Yeah. Hound dog. Yeah, you're a hound dog, pal. Okay, I was wondering what kind of digs that Donald Trump will have in prison, because I kind of think he's going there eventually. On the other hand, you know how it works with people who deal with their people. Now, Bernie Madoff got sent away because he actually hurt their people. And at some point, people got to realize this guy's hurting their people. And that's what you get for elevating a mobbed-up Russian money launderer, and everybody knew it no matter what his persona was on The Apprentice. Jesus. You know what? God, it just kills me. And people fall for it, and they're continuing to fall for it. I love this MAGA caravan down there at the border, too. They went down there to, stop the onslaught of this invasion, and they go down there, and there's nothing there. Well, what do you expect? It's effing Texas. Jeez. They're expecting, wall-to-wall invasion of all these brown people just, climbing over the fence and going through the fence like, I don't know, one of those insect movies. Swarms of them. Swarms of illegals. They've turned from caravans to swarms. You and I would think, well, why don't they consider the fact that these people walked? They didn't get on an airplane. They didn't get on a jet. They didn't get on a train. They didn't get on a bus. They walked 1,400 miles or more in some cases to come to the land of plenty, welcoming the immigrant. Jesus H, my God. I like mixing those. I do. I really do. So you and I would think, well, why wouldn't they consider the effort that it takes? Not just why, but you have to ask yourself why. Walking 1,400 miles to get away from something, to go to something that's, the paradise at the northern coast. We're going to get to the northern coast. It's the land of promise. So they get here. There's a procedure to become an asylum seeker. And you know what they call it? They call it illegal. You're an illegal. No, they're not. They're asylum seekers. They're going through a process. You have called them illegals for a couple of decades now. Used to be you're an undocumented alien. And you got a parking ticket. Pay this parking ticket. Sometimes you had to show up in court, sometimes not. No big deal. But now, let's scapegoat these brown people. And in many cases, they are brown people, and that's exactly what they mean for it to be in terms of their PR, their propaganda. They're not including the Russian anchor babies in Florida, believe me. That's not the hordes of insects climbing over the wall and through the wall from border to border. Ah. So what are these MAGA Nazis in that caravan down there? They were expecting, 7,100, and they got like two semis. Maybe they got a few more than that. But certainly not the 7,100 or what other number that they said they were going to get. They're left getting a horse trough out, filling it with water and throwing people in and saying they're baptized to do God's work. God's army. That's what they call themselves, God's army. Which I got to remind people that God's army in Arabic is, guess what? In Arabic, God's army is Hezbollah. Mm-hmm. And when you're dealing with Mike Flynn and you're dealing with a Steve Bannon, that's not by accident. That is by design. Jeez. And people are falling for it. And you know how they're falling for it. It's because you and I know that there's been a reason why they've been attacking public education in this country for so long. That a former president can take part in an insurrection. We watch him doing it in real time. We see a mob trying to take over the government to keep him in power. They were beat back and said, we can't arrest them all right now. We'll arrest them in time, and we're still arresting them, bringing them to court and throwing them in the slammer. And it clearly says in the 14th Amendment, anybody who does that doesn't get to be president. You don't get to run for office. and we're questioning whether that applies to this guy. Okay. The Ukraine bill. Ukraine aid. Donnie Trump doesn't want him to get it because he and Vlad are friends. And the reason they're friends is that, when you're a mobbed up Russian money launderer, you got to be an earner. Jesus. My God. Okay. It's Monday. I might as well fill you in on what we have in the curated part of the show, since we take an effort and make an effort to do so. And why don't we give you that rundown? Well, Moses Mike Johnson's claims about the border bill is just a lie. And I got to tell you, MSNBC has turned so bad that I'm using Morning Joe clips because he's the sound of reason there now. God, I can't stand the guy. But you can't live on Medias touch alone, the Medias group. You can't. Got to have a little something else. Okay, Morning Joe. On the rest of the menu, well, here's some good news, I think. The governor of Pennsylvania, we all know him as Josh Shapiro, is set to deliver a second budget while seeking more money for higher education, and public transit. Good. The largest tribe in South Dakota has barred the state's governor. We know her as Kristi Noem. Well, they're barring her from its lands after her speech about unauthorized immigration harming reservations. It wasn't quite put that way. She called them illegals. And federal judges are setting the record straight over claims the January 6th insurgents are just political prisoners. Good. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a Boston man has been extradited from Sweden to face obstruction charges in arson cases targeting Jewish organizations, synagogues, other places. And a diplomatic rift between Ecuador and Russia appeared to intensify after Putin decided to ban some imports of bananas from Ecuador. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page to the left from that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And I want to just say right up front, I want to thank those of you who have been continuing to help us pay our bills by becoming recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio, and not only becoming, but have been recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio for many years, and for a long time in other cases too. So we really want to thank you for being so generous in allowing us to pay those bills so we can fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for, well, so many years. How can you become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio? Well, if you could afford to send us what you might spend, I don't know, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? You could send the funds that you might spend on that to us once a month, and then you're a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and it really helps. So thank you. And once again, thank you to those of you who have been recurring Patreons of Netroots Radio. And thank you to those of you who might consider becoming such in the near future. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on social media like, Twitter. Yeah, I know. We call it Twitter. Spoutable, Blue Sky, Mastodon, Facebook. You can do so by going to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. And, of course, I'm reminding folks that we all actually take care of Facebook. So whenever we're there, we take care of it. So there we are. You can also follow me. Oh, I want to say thank you to Tom for doing all that and everything else, too. You could follow me on all those social media platforms and also like Tumblr and Instagram, yada, yada, yada. You can do so at Justice Putnam. I always mention that we post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. And you can access those diaries by following my social media feeds because the links are right there. To get to the links. Yeah, well, we can't fit them in the social media platforms, so go to Daily Co's and you can also hang out and look at other diaries because no matter whether they want to call them stories, they will always be diaries to us. If you would like to follow the show, yeah, how about the show on Twitter? It's just a placeholder, but you can do so at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, Audible. We're on Audible now, Amazon. Yeah, we're everywhere, but you can do so by getting those podcasts there, and please do. And I don't know, rate them if they ask you to rate them because we got to get up in the search engine somehow because the powerhouses of resistance need to resist. And let people know that we are. Anyway, thank you for doing all of that. And let us now tuck into this first offering here. In the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, it is out of the Associated Press by Mark Levy. Governor Josh Shapiro is set to deliver a second budget proposal to Pennsylvania lawmakers tomorrow, Tuesday, with a firmer grasp on how he wants to pursue several top priorities. His state in a relatively strong fiscal position and lessons learned from last year's ugly budget fight. Most details of the governor's budget plan for the 24-25 fiscal year, which starts on July 1st, remained under wraps, but Shapiro has made it clear he will seek more money for higher education and public transit and possibly underfunded public schools. He also wants to spend more money to attract major companies and seems ready to revisit the controversial item that helped sow a protracted budget fight last year. Creating a new private school voucher program. Now, Josh, please don't do this. It's a scam. That's why they say possibly underfunded public schools. Because if you fund the public schools, what's the need for a voucher program so that you can pay rich kids private school tuition? Because that's who's going to get it. Now, Shapiro's first budget proposal disappointed many allies who felt it was not bold enough. This year, he's returning with bigger proposals based on recommendations from his task forces and appointees. Now, Shapiro faces a number of cost pressures, too, from health care for the poor to county-run mental health services. One other difference this year is Shapiro is expected to deliver his budget address to a joint session of the House and Senate in the Capitol Rotunda. Governors historically deliver the speech in the House, but workers have put up scaffolding there to repair damage from a water leak a year ago. Whatever Shapiro proposes will require passage from the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives and the Republican-controlled Senate. Appropriations Committee hearings start on February 20th. Javed of the Washington Post brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. The largest tribe in South Dakota has barred the state's governor from its lands for the second time in at least 5 years after her speech about curbing immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border offended the tribal president. Frank Starr comes out, the president of the Oglala Sioux tribe, made the Pine Ridge Reservation in southwestern South Dakota off limits to Christy L. Nome on Friday after she told the state legislature that she was sending razor wire and security personnel to Texas and that unauthorized immigration was harming reservations. Due to the safety of the Oyate, effective immediately, you are hereby banished from the homelands of the Oglala Sioux tribe. And he said that with an exclamation mark, too. Starr comes out said in a statement posted to social media. Oyate is a word for people or nation. Starr comes out noted that the Oglala Sioux is a sovereign nation under the protection of the United States, not South Dakota. Michael Kunzelman and Alana Durkin-Richer of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. While sentencing a North Carolina man to prison for his role in the U.S. Capitol riot, it wasn't a riot! Stop saying that. A Republican-appointed judge issued a stark warning. Efforts to portray the mob of Trump supporters as heroes and play down the violence that unfolded on January 6, 2021 poses a serious threat to the nation. Well, I would also say calling it a riot. So come on, journalists. U.S. District Judge Royce Lamberth condemned the depiction by Trump and Republican allies of the January 6 defendants as political prisoners and hostages. Lamberth also denounced attempts to undermine the legitimacy of the justice system for punishing rioters who broke the law when they invaded the Capitol. In my 37 years on the bench, I cannot recall a time when such meritless justifications of criminal activity have gone mainstream, Lamberth, an appointee of President Ronald Reagan, wrote in a recent ruling. The judge added he fears that such destructive, misguided rhetoric could presage further danger to our country. Well, yeah. As Trump floats potential pardons for rioters if he returns to the White House, judges overseeing more than 1,200 January 6 criminal cases in Washington's federal court are using their platform to try to set the record straight concerning distortions about an attack that was broadcast live on television. A growing number of defendants appear to be embracing rhetoric spread by Trump, giving defiant speeches in court, repeating his false election claims, and portraying themselves as patriots. And the judges are having none of it. Okay, go to the links provided and read the rest of that article. It's rather delicious what they are doing. All right, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world. And boy, do we have weather from around the world. And we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, mundane monsters among us. Like many families with young kids, the Haas family is typical. Mom Hedvig gardens and Dad Rudolph strives for promotions at work. However, there's a bit of a difference here. You see, the Haas's live next door to Auschwitz, and as the commandant of the infamous death camp, Rudolph personally oversees the daily disposal of Jews who, according to the plan of Rudolph's bosses, Eichmann and ultimately Hitler, are to be eliminated as part of their final solution. While The Zone of Interest is as much a movie about the Holocaust as Schindler's List, it differs in that the focus is on the people who run the camps rather than those in it. When prisoners do appear, it's in the background. While little of the inside of the camp is seen, it is heard in a chillingly disquieting a cappella soundtrack with distinct gunshots and occasional screams amidst the German dialogue. And it's as effective as any horror movie. Likewise, mundane scenes like one with Hedwig showing off a new fur coat or sorting through a pile of children's clothing that Rudolph brings home from work take on a whole new meaning when you realize where they came from. Christian Friedel and Sandra Holler are remarkable in the respective leading roles as Randolph and Hedwig. Holler, who recently received an Oscar nomination for her work in Anatomy of a Fall, shows why she's one of the best international actresses working today. Their understated, minimalist portrayals bring home these monsters. Seemingly average in their day-to-day life, the display of and begged questions about the gaping hole in their humanity makes The Zone of Interest one of the most effective and unforgettable movies about the Holocaust ever. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
We're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
This is the story of a very special woman. In a matter of seconds, she turned herself into a great mathematician or an entrepreneur. Her knowledge was limitless and still is. She could also make monsters disappear, especially those that lurked in the shadows under the bed. Once, this woman put back together a teenage girl's broken heart, which had been shattered in 1,000 pieces. Just by giving her a bear hug. She masqueraded as a regular person at work, but as a superhero at home. Everyone knows her as Gabriella. I still call her Mom.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need to help, complete with tips and resources at aarp.org/caregiving. A public service announcement brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, Show your Progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the Progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping Progressive Radio at full power.
Pardon me. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. In states across the country, the use or non-use of the pardon, an executive branch power that officially forgives a crime, is a total hodgepodge. In 16 states, pardons are frequently or regularly granted according to the Restoration of Rights Project, but in 13 states, they are rare indeed. Interestingly, the redness or blueness of a state is not necessarily determinative. For example, South Carolina grants hundreds of pardons each year, and so does Delaware, while supposedly progressive Massachusetts for decades has paid virtually no attention to the pardon power, although the present governor, Maura Healey, is changing that. Some example of states' renewed use of pardons? Missouri Governor Mike Parsons, a former sheriff, has pardoned over 600 people in 3 years. Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers has granted 1,100 pardons, and recent Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf granted 2,500, many for marijuana-related offenses. Pardons can be a powerful tool for doing justice. Their renewed use is part of a national movement to restore rights and allow people to pursue their education and professions and employment and housing that will give people something we often say we believe in, a second chance. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. February 3rd, 2023, 38 Norfolk Southern rail cars derailed in East Palestine, Ohio, 20 of which carried hazardous materials and 11 of which caught fire. The Railway Safety Act was filed shortly after in Congress, but in 2023, Norfolk Southern and the rail industry spent millions trying to kill it. The Railway Safety Act increases fines for safety violations, updates inspection regulations, requires a minimum 2-person crew for certain trains, retires older tanker cars, and provides funding for safety research, among many provisions. Money and politics groups Public Citizen and Open Secrets analyzed political spending by Norfolk Southern on contributions to candidates and super PACs and spending on lobbying. They found that Norfolk Southern and its subsidiaries mobilized an army of 41 lobbyists and spent over $2.3 million on lobbying in 2023, up 30% from before the derailment. That doesn't include the rest of the industry. Just in the 2024 election cycle, the rail industry has donated over $2.3 million to candidates and PACs to date. It spent another $24 million on lobbying. That money bought inaction. The bill, introduced in March 2023, remains stuck in the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation. We have links to Open Secrets and other resources at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1913. That was the day that Ida Bremen was killed while she stood up for the rights of working people in Rochester, New York. Ida was born in Russia to a Jewish family. She came to the United States fleeing persecution in her homeland. Her family came to Rochester because it was a thriving center of the U.S. garment industry. Seeking a better life, Ida's father joined the Brotherhood of Tailors. In January, garment workers in New York City had gone out on strike. Factory owners in the Big Apple decided to send work to Rochester in an effort to avoid the striking workers. Unions were forbidden in the Rochester garment industry. Union leaders from New York City came to Rochester asking them to stand up against the factory owners. The workers in Rochester agreed to support the strike, but they wanted union recognition, the 8-hour day, and a pay raise. Ida and her father were among the first to walk off the job. Ida joined picketers in front of a sweatshop on Clifford Street. The picketers were there to protest the shop's workers who were not taking part in the strike. The shop owner, Valentine Sauter, fired a rifle into the crowd of picketers. Ida was struck by the boss's bullet and killed. She was only 18 years old. That night, she was supposed to have her engagement party. The community was outraged. 5,000 people attended her funeral. Mass rallies were held across the area. While no one was ever held accountable for her death, Ida's murder became a rallying cry for the striking workers. They continued to fight until April, when they won the right to join a union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. We always begin, whether from around the world, along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 40 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs of around 52, which is a tad warmer than what we had over the weekend. Rain showers are in the vicinity, and I would say they're right over us at the very moment. And there will be becoming more intermittent as the afternoon progresses, and it's still early morning. Highs once again will be 52, winds light and variable, though we are still, they took it off. We were under a high wind watch, but we now are not. And it did quite a bit of damage, as I noted earlier. Considerable cloudiness overnight with occasional rain showers. Between the day and night, we're going to have about a third of an inch of rain. Winds will be light and variable tonight. Did I say lows near 40? Well, I am now. Overcast tomorrow with highs in the upper 40s. Winds light and variable, and a small chance of rain. Pollen is still rated as none here in our little town of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 39 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is low at level 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 29.51 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 100%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 52 degrees and cloudy. Paris is 47 degrees and cloudy. Rome is 58 and mostly cloudy. Bagram is 25 and clear. Kyiv is 35 degrees and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 68 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 35 degrees and merely cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 62 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 53 degrees and mostly cloudy with a high wind advisory. Chicago, Illinois is 36 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 40 degrees Fahrenheit and fair. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. At the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. the brother of a man suspected in 4 arsons involving Jewish institutions in the Boston area in 2019, has been extradited from Sweden to face charges alleging that he obstructed the investigation. Alexander Giannakakis, age 37, formerly of Quincy, worked in security at the U.S. Embassy in Stockholm, Sweden, when he was arrested by Swedish authorities in 2022. He has been awaiting extradition proceedings, according to a statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Boston. Giannakakis arrived in Boston on Friday and is scheduled to appear in federal court later on today. He has not yet named or been appointed an attorney, according to online case records, and an online database search for people with the last name Giannakakis in Massachusetts turned up a listing for an Alexander, but no phone number was available. His brother was hospitalized in a coma at the time he was identified as a suspect in February of 2020, and he died that year. Federal authorities did not name him. Alexander Giannakakis was indicted by a federal grand jury in Boston in 2019 on charges of making false statements in a matter involving domestic terrorism, falsifying, concealing, and covering up a material fact in a matter involving domestic terrorism, concealing records in a federal investigation, tampering with objects and documents, and tampering with an official proceeding. In connection with his arrest in Sweden, Giannakakis was convicted of unlawfully possessing a firearm and other weapons. He served a sentence in Swedish prison, which ended in December. The Swedish government granted the U.S. extradition request on December 21st, the U.S. Attorney's Office said.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Gabriella Molina at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A diplomatic rift between Ecuador and Russia appeared to intensify over the weekend after the European nation decided to ban some imports of bananas from Ecuador. The two countries have been at loggerheads recently after Ecuador decided to transfer some of its old Russian military equipment to the United States in exchange for $200 million in new military gear. On Saturday, Russia's Federal Agency for Veterinary and Phytosanitary Controls announced it was banning imports from 5 Ecuadorian banana companies, claiming that a disease had been found in previous shipments of their fruits. Ecuador is the world's leading banana exporter, with sales around $3.5 billion in 2022. Around a fifth of its annual sales go to Russia. Russia's decision to ban some imports came after President Daniel Noboa announced in January that Ecuador would transfer several tons of old Russian-made military equipment to the United States. He said the equipment was no longer usable and described it as scrap metal that would be replaced with new equipment needed to fight the drug gangs which have been terrorizing the country. Russia's foreign ministry protested Noboa's decision, saying that it violated a contract that stipulated Ecuador could not sell the equipment to third parties without Russia's consent. Richard Salazar, the director of Cookbook, one of Ecuador's main associations of banana exporters, said that he was surprised by Russia's drastic decision, though he added that at least 15 companies continue to export bananas to Russia. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Terry Duck Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.